Okay, so let's talk about why I really liked actually, what Terminator Dark Fate brings to the Terminator series as a continuation of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And it really starts right off with just that opener there. And okay, spoilers, tons of spoilers in this video in case you randomly stumble across this YouTube video. So spoilers, lots of them. I'm going to try not to spoil the end of the movie. I feel like most spoilers are just already online and people have just read them. But I'm going to stick to spoilers about the premise and what led to kind of the conflict that Dark Fate presents, and how the characters got there. But I'm not going to just do straight spoilers of like the final act. Listen, if you haven't watched the movie or you haven't read every single spoiler, keep that in mind here. So opening of the movie, of course, 1998, John Connor gets blown away. Edward Furlong, John Connor, 3 years after the events of Terminator 2. And man, even just seeing it online, it was perfect in its execution. Doesn't mean that you wanted that to happen to the characters or anything, or to John, but they nailed it. And I actually like what happened. A big problem that I had with Terminator 2, and why I kind of, in my days of what's canon and what's not, would tend to shy away from including Terminator 2, as great as a straight action movie as it was, and as great as the characters were, and it was just so amazingly done. But as far as what it brought to the mythos, I did think that it kind of took away from what we got, that perfect story in Terminator 1. And a big part of that was it closed a loop that kind of had to stay open for any of it to work. Just with regard to paradoxes and things, unless you're going full Endgame, Avengers Endgame with alternate realities, which I tend not to like in time travel things. And in Terminator 2, by having Skynet birthed out of the CPU of a Terminator that was created by Skynet that supposedly had been originally developed by humans, it put everything in this little pocket future universe that really had no entry point, and it really kind of diminished the story's quality of being a cautionary tale on being careful with what technology you develop, or technology run amok, or creating technology that destroys us. It really lost all of that, because by having the Terminators themselves born out of this future war that looped in on itself, and the savior in that war being born out of a soldier that came from that war, it was like it became kind of more about just future warriors from another dimension that came to our reality. And it was cool, and when you get caught up in the story watching Terminator 2, and it's really neat. But even back in the day, my friends and I used to, when we talk about these movies, we always agreed that there kind of had to be a Terminator 3. It couldn't exist, the whole story, and it just couldn't really work where everything was birthed out of the future as presented in Terminator 2. Humans had to make Skynet independent of the original Endo ARM and the original Endo CPU. And there had to be an original John Connor. And lots of great discussions have come out of that whole thing, with Reese actually impregnating Sarah and erasing the original John Connor. And so I like that Dark Fate, what it did, big time spoiler here, is that it established that this isn't just some singular war with a very specific AI entity called Skynet. It really is about AI being an inevitable technology that's coming. And it's either going to come by humans just thinking it up, or it'll come maybe even quicker if it is based on itself, like Terminator 2. Or if you stop Judgment Day completely and just eradicate the entire path, A to B, of humans to Skynet, then some other AI will be developed. And that's why the opening does not destroy any of the events or any of the accomplishments of Terminator 2, because they won that war. And the Rev 9 and Grace and their future war, that's Edge of Tomorrow. That's a different conflict with a different entity that has parallel technology. It was not born out of the original It's not like Skynet's, it rose from the ashes of Skynet. No, it was completely independent. And if that was negated, then AI would be created by some other means. I think of it as, well, I have been thinking of it. It's like a lot of military strategists or experts have been saying that the next war is going to be like maybe World War, let's say, is going to be fought largely, I think I just said the word fought largely with drones. And it's going to be fought largely with, EMPs. And that battlefield is coming, where there's going to be an EMP set off by a nuke or some sort of a computer virus or something in a power grid. That'll shut down electricity that way. And, drones. And so let's say that we had a war where Iran sent a swarm of drones into the United States and was doing EMP stuff. And then they were just causing havoc. And then we found a way to travel back in time and undo all that. And we won. And so that war would have been a war that was where we were victorious, where there would have been heroes and there would have been martyrs and so on and so forth. But then maybe 10 years later, China launches drones. And they're different, they're not the exact same model that the Iranians would have used. And they're like, maybe instead of doing the EMP blast, they do the, disrupting the power grid with a virus type of a thing. It's the tactics sequentially are going to lead to that, really, no matter who is going to be, controlling the pieces. And that's what I find really fascinating. And it opens up the loop from Terminator. And originally it was going to be Skynet with original John. But because of the time travel technology, the Skynet sent the 3 Terminators back in time. I find it really interesting that Carl was sent to 1998, because if obviously your Terminator history, which Dark Fate reminds you of, Judgment Day happened in 97. So Skynet's thinking clearly was send a Terminator before John was born, send a Terminator when John was 10, and send a Terminator 1 year into the war. Send it back post Judgment Day. That's kind of fascinating to think about. Like what they were like, okay, maybe we need to get him when, when technology or weaponry is still really just in ashes because of the nuclear war. Anyway, just an interesting little thing about it being 1998, because obviously that would be post-Judgment Day. So I really like that Mythos-wise, it opened up the the timeline, I guess you'd say, so that things would have gone on to include future wars with AI, with time displacement equipment, and that it did not require Skynet. And so there's a certain inevitability in that that's just where humans are going in this universe, AI, Terminators, and time displacement equipment. That's like global technology that the world was just going to. And stopping that would almost be like stopping electricity or stopping firearms or, guided missiles or computers. It's like, go back and, kill Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, whoever, people that invented the military weapons and things. Do you just stop those types of wars? No, I don't think that would really happen. You would just maybe delay them or make them come from a different place. I've sometimes even wondered, what would happen if George Lucas was never born? Or if he really did die in that car crash that he had when he was young. And Star Wars was never made. Would we never have any blockbuster movies? Would we never have any space movies? Would we, would we still be stuck in the 70s, the early to mid 70s forever? And I don't think so. I think somebody would have come up with the first Star Wars. It wouldn't have been Star Wars. It wouldn't have had those actors. It wouldn't have had, the music and all that stuff. But there would have been some event, and maybe it would have been a shadow of what, our Star Wars and all the pop culture events that followed, movie-wise and, everything-wise. But something would have happened, If there was no Jurassic Park, okay, what would have been the next big, CG thing or the first big CG thing after Terminator 2? Who would have really run with it? And then how would that have steered things? So that's how I see what the movie presented as the AI and those future wars. It's coming eventually. It's an inevitability. And the reason that I think that it said it was an inevitability is that the AI it's just what the human race is pursuing. And it's inevitable that once AI is developed, eventually it'll get smart enough that it'll think that humans are a problem and need to be exterminated. And so whoever develops the AI, it always comes to that conclusion. And whether it sends out nukes to wipe everybody out, or it does an EMP and starves everybody out, or whatever its tactics are, it's going to turn on humans, and it's going to do so in a big way. And then the follow-up inevitability, this is another big spoiler here, and that is that the AI, once it runs its course, once it is successful in dominating the planet or fulfilling its mission, the next inevitability is that the AI then actually decides that it wants to be human. It's like it gets so focused in competing with humanity or realizing that the tasks that it was originally designed for are being hindered by humanity. But once it gets humanity out of the way, suddenly the learning computer portion, as it continues to advance and it continues to grow, it realizes it was a machine created by humans for humans. And that once it gets too big for its britches and takes out humanity, then it's like, okay, now you're a glorified paperweight, Skynet, Legion, whatever you are, you're nothing. And so it to continue with having some sort of purpose, the only thing that it can think of to emulate is human behavior. And even to the point where it prefers human behavior. And man, do I find that fascinating. I really feel like Dark Fate is an awesome continuation of T2 with that in mind. And that Carl is the fulfillment of what John wanted Uncle Bob to be. And what Uncle Bob was started realizing that he kind of wanted to be, but just didn't see at the time how that could happen. And there were just pressing matters. The mission, when they're focused on a mission, they even say it in the movie. When a Terminator's focused on its prey or its target, there's nothing else it's going to think about or deviate that's going to distract it from that, period. And so Uncle Bob was kind of in, okay, stop Skynet mode. And he was right, and he did stop Skynet. But if he had been allowed to live without that war, without the mission, he would have become that father that Sarah saw in the desert, where he was goofing with John. And Carl really did become that. And what also that means is that the T-1000 would have eventually become that. And that the Rev 9, it's like, it's the Dark Knight saying. In Terminator, though, it's reversed. It's you either die the villain or you live long enough to sacrifice yourself for the humans. It's like you either die a villain or you live long enough to become the hero. And that's what happens with all the Terminators. They mostly die, but Uncle Bob, Carl show that if they could outlast their mission, they ultimately all come to the same conclusion that living with a purpose, even serving others, serving humanity even, and I don't think that softens the character or weakens them. I feel like it's very much in the tradition of like Roy Batty and what he felt at the end of his life. And I've never heard anybody think that like Batty was a weakened character or a softened character because he helped Deckard live at the end. And so it's got neat parallels with, like Blade Runner. I see it almost as like the computer in war games, where when it does the math of the tic-tac-toe a billion times, that it realizes it's always a stalemate, and that Skynet or the Terminators eventually figure out, wait a minute, you've got to break out of this loop of just killing off the humans, because then there's just nothing left, or just kind of cycling the war, and that was really, really cool to think about. I really like how Carl showed that. And I thought they just did a good job with him. He wasn't doing the stupid Elton John glasses, talk to the hand, dumb, faces and smiles like he was doing with Jai Courtney. He was really played really well. I really got into the sentimentality of his character. And I did for Genesis. It really was one of the highlights of that movie too. And I'm kind of glad that they brought it into this. They actually did bring a lot of elements from a lot of the bad sequels into this. You've got the endoskeleton with the liquid metal outside, like the TX. It can kind of tap into the internet like the TX2. You've got the killer of John becoming good, which of course was Terminator 3. They clearly mined, kind of the morsels from those failed sequels or bad sequels or whatever you want to call them. And I thought it's like, okay, let's repackage them in a way that actually does honor the mythos. Because I actually do think that this movie does. And I do think that it honors the legacy. And even John's death causes Carl to become what he is. It's like John creates, in his death, he creates the ultimate Uncle Bob. And I thought that was a good extension of John and worthy of his character. And again, to be fair, there's no bringing back Edward Furlong in that role. And the other movie sequels had done John to death, to where he was literally a bad guy and he was an idiot, in Terminator 3 and so forth. And so I get why they took him out. But again, for all the reasons I just said up to now, it brings back the horror aspect, the just tragedy aspect. It takes Sarah back to where she was, where, she was living a life as a waitress, and then her whole world is thrown into chaos and she has to adapt. And then kind of the reverse of that happens, where, she was a protective mom, and then that was taken away. And, we get to kind of see her grow through that, and then kind of, okay, I won't get into final act stuff, like I said. But Yeah, the inevitability of that technology being developed, the AI, without discounting the victory of John and Sarah and the human resistance against Skynet, the total victory and eradication of Skynet, with of course just the tragic, final just action there of Skynet sending the 3 Terminator. I could almost see it be like Skynet somehow recognized that 2 protectors were sent back in time, so it sent 3 Terminators. It's like, okay, we're gonna, we gotta stack the deck. So you got Uncle Bob and you got Reese, so we're gonna send 1 more, and it did the job. But because of what they did with Cyberdyne in Terminator 2. It didn't matter at that point, which was horrible for John and horrible for Sarah. But it did give birth to Carl, which did then allow them to help with the next conflict that was not related to the previous one. It's really what I wanted kind of the sequel trilogy to do. Not just be like, yeah, the bad guys from the last fight that you had total victory over, they're just back. And it's just, happening all over again as if like there was never any victory. Because it's parallel tech. They are Terminators. They do use time travel, but they are not Skynet. And they did not develop out of Skynet. And then the inevitability of the AI wanting to become human. It's just, but with still the cautionary tale of, hey, it's coming and be ready and, just be wise and responsible and all that stuff. If you want to kind of get all, what can we learn from this type, anyway, the execution of the action, not up to par with Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. Light on atmosphere in a lot of those scenes. The first daytime truck chase with the big dump truck with the plow thing on the front. I mean, it was cool how it was flipping cars around, but the guy jumping from car to car. It really reminded me of the Matrix Reloaded freeway chase with the agents jumping around. And it's an okay aesthetic. It's not my preference for a Terminator movie. So the stuff that it didn't do awesomely, it didn't go into cringe territory. Like I said, with the talk to the hand and the Elton John glasses, or like all the bad dialogue and crap from the Star Wars prequels. It never went that bad. It's just kind of a bummer that it just wasn't significantly better, especially with just the chases and things. But this movie's all about the mythos for me, and I just really like how it again honored the first 2. It did, I guess, a passing of the torch, but without really passing of the torch. It wasn't just like, here, you guys are now going to fight Skynet. No, they were working. Sarah and Carl were working out their stuff from their war that did save humanity. And pushed it back, the new conflict back decades, I think. And so, again, they had their true victory. The world was in their debt. But then, parallel horrors just occurred later. And they can end it now and just say, hey, because of how it ended, we've got sort of a parallel to the ending of Terminator 1. And we got our trilogy, and you can kind of just see how you're always going to have to be careful, even if you defeat AI or you do kind of suppress it when it does run amok. It's something you still have to be careful of. And, these people may very well find themselves fighting, additional battles or what have you. But that's why I like it. That's what I think is worth talking about. That's where I think the strength really was in the plot and in the writing. And why I do think it's kind of a worthy closer to the Terminator trilogy. Thanks for listening.